Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Night Garden. I am Vamp, and I'm here to talk to you about art today. Art! And Ledge is here with me.
Hello.
Today, we are going to be giving Ledge a sort of an anatomy lesson. Not really an anatomy lesson, more of like a how to break down a reference lesson.
With hammers.
No.
Break it down.
Not that either.
Oh.
As of the recording here, the last thing that we did is the redraws. And one of the things that we noticed is that Ledge had a hard time with the hands, completely ignored the feet, and had a hard time figuring out proportions. So on screen right now, we have the reference that he took for that picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured we would walk him through the general idea of how proportions work and how to break down a reference. So let's start with the full body here. You can see I have two different folders. We're going to start with this folder just for purposes. I've pre-drawn here. These are the rough size of the figure's head. So I've basically stacked all the heads on top of each other. And this gives us 6.5 heads. So Ledge in this picture is 6.5 heads tall. You basically, to keep your proportions correct, you want to use the head as a measure of reference. So like if you took one of these heads and you moved it, and you put them next to each other, you'd have about 2 heads in between for the length of your chest. Mm-hmm. So everything basically can be measured by this head. And that way you can figure out roughly where things lie and how long things are in relation to each other.
And I know I made a joke about the man, the anatomical man, Da Vinci's man.
Yeah.
The man.
The man. The ideal man.
The ideal man. And, like, is that kind of where that drawing comes from? Is, like, measuring out and figuring out.
Yeah, it has to do with proportions. I mean, nobody is going to sit there and draw a full man every time they're trying to make proportions because Leonardo da Vinci was on another level. But, you know, you can see here that I did a basic wireframe that used the head as a reference and got roughly the right proportions. Now, if I moved it over, it probably wouldn't match up 1-to-1. Actually, that's pretty damn good. The knees are a little high, but yeah, that's pretty close. So I just did that from eyeballing and making sure that I had my heads the right size. Now, you can use this as a way to stylize too. When you're using a reference, the idea isn't to trace or to... how do I put this? What you did when you were looking at your reference was you tried to kind of trace the outline of the body with your eyes, right?
Right.
That's not quite what a reference is for. You want to really use it as a guide. So, like, with what I did here, I kind of figured out how far apart the shoulders were and just put a circle here. I put a circle for the top of the chest. Simple shapes just to kind of make, like, guidelines where those things would lie once I actually do the full drawing. And I didn't draw this ahead of time, but to make this a little bit more visible, here's where it'd be slightly more stylized with the same pose, but taller. So
Clamp.
I have, yeah, kind of. I have 7.5 heads here, so I've given you an extra head here. So when I draw this, I can use those rough shapes of the body that I know are there and then still have something that looks pretty accurate based on the reference, just because I'm using that as a guide.
Mm-hmm. In regards to that, though, doesn't that throw off your anatomy? Because, like, anatomically speaking, on average, somebody's legs would be a certain length, and then their arms would then also be a certain length.
Not necessarily. So it depends on how you typically draw. So this is what I mean by stylization. So here, what you have is you have roughly, your legs are slightly longer than your torso here, which is according to this, correct.
Okay.
It's just a longer distance than what the 6.5 heads do. So, like my mentor, Hardy Fowler, he does things at 8.5 heads, which are comic book proportions. Most superheroes are at 8 to 8.5 heads.
That's probably true of models.
Probably.
Because people like them tall.
But, like...
Gotta be tall to be a superhero.
You can make anybody... Like, you can do 8.5 heads for somebody who's really short, too. Like, you can make somebody short. It's just a matter of the head size. So, like...
Really tiny head.
And also this changes for, like, children and stuff like that. Like, a toddler is typically 3.5 heads versus 7 to 8. But 7.5 heads is the typical drawing size for most average people. Does this make sense so far?
I guess.
Okay, do you have any questions?
Huh. Why are they so mean to shorties?
I mean, they're not. Moving on, then. I'm gonna make fun of you for a minute, because...
For free!
For free! You were like, how do hands work? And then you were like, I don't even want it with the feet. So, like, I've specifically called out the hands and the feet here.
I mean, I also called out the fact that one of my hands was not even in picture, so I had to imagination the hand, because I decided not to go and try to take a new reference picture.
Yeah, which you could have easily just taken a reference picture of your hand, too, trying to do the same pose.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to show you how you can kind of work against that. So we have your reference here cut up to the 2 hands and the feet. And then I have the references again at half. The reason why I put them at half opacity is to show you this. Each piece of the body breaks down to a basic shape.
I am a Minecraft.
You are a Minecraft. So what I'm showing here in these hands is that your palm area basically can break down to a square. Most people have a short kind of palm. If you have like a weirdly large hand, then it might be more of a rectangle, but like most people have a square palm. So on this square here, you can see it's tipped back. So you see the bottom, and that foreshortens. Mm-hmm. On the middle one, you can see that it's tipped to the side, but also up. So you can see the top of the box and the one side of the box. So that's a pretty hard thing to draw, especially if you're not quite sure how to break things down into shapes. But then you have other shapes that go into this that make it more into a hand. So here I have the actual shapes that would make the hands and the feet. The feet, you have basically a square and a wedge.
Cheese.
Yeah, basically. But these blue spots here, you can see this is kind of like a circle with a cylinder coming off of it. And then you have a simple cylinder, and then you have a tapered cylinder, and that makes your thumb. And then your fingers basically break down to 3 cylinders that are roughly the same size. Mm-hmm. So I did this just showing roughly over top of the reference to show how that breaks down. And then I just drew them next to it using that guide. Mm-hmm. Another thing you'll notice is that if you look at your reference and then look at the way that I drew these here, the big toe points up while the rest of the toes curl down. So you have simplified shapes because there's no joints in your toes. It's basically just taking the tip of your finger. And then, no noticeable joints, I should say. Yeah. And then, you kind of simplify, and there's your foot shape.
So isn't there, like, the amount of bones in your feet is more than, like, the rest of your body?
Yeah,
combined
your hands and feet have a ton of bones.
Yeah.
Does that breakdown kind of make sense to you? Like, do you think you could draw a hand and a foot based on that?
I could definitely try.
Go for it.
Oh, boy. Yeah, give me a new layer.
Yeah, gave you a new layer. Oh boy. Deadpool. I have a Funko Pop of Bob Ross Deadpool on my desk, and I just knocked him over.
Oh boy.
You don't have to stay on that bright red either.
Well, it's easier to see, so we're gonna start with a box, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Box.
Well, and one of the things that makes anatomy hard is that this stuff is existing in a space, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, there is a little bit of perspective here, which is very hard to break down if you know nothing about perspective.
My fingers are huge.
Yeah, you drew your fingers very big compared to your box. So that wasn't a bad attempt. One of the things here is that your box is going to be the biggest point, right? So you want your box to be more like that, right? And then these would be a good size based on that size box. So you just kind of went a little bit big compared to a little small.
Well, how do you know how big to make it?
So that goes back to proportions. This is your main shape, right? So if you consider this red box as your head, then you measure, this is about half of your box. This is about half of your box. So you measure based on what your box is.
Yeah, but when you're like when you're using references for like an idea of it, you're not going to just be tracing your boxes over top of it and then adding it in later.
No, you're not, but that's what comes in with knowing how to figure out your proportions. So like if you're doing a full body, you would break down by the size of your head. And then when you're doing your hand, if you hold it in front of your face, your hand makes up about the size of your face. So then your square for your hand would be about this height from your nose to the bottom of your chin, which we don't have here because we're just looking at the hands and feet.
Mm-hmm. 3D.
So with this hand, one of the things that I'll point out is that your cylinders start at the bottom of that box for your fingers. When you actually draw those, you're going to wind up having a little bit of a bump, like you can see in my black line here. That shows the bottom of your cylinder. That's your knuckle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I was trying to get the knuckles when the other ones were on the actual piece.
Yeah, it's hard at the angle that you have that hand.
Yep.
Hands are hard.
They are not separated fingers. This seems like it would take so much longer.
Once you get good at doing certain things, you wind up not going in depth like this. So the reason why I'm having you do these wireframes is so that you can figure out how the shapes interlock and relate to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the point that I'm at, for example, I wouldn't do any of this.
Mm-hmm.
I would wind up just going to this point and then drawing my loose shapes over top like this. Because I know that this is basically like a curved cylinder. I know that this comes up to the body like this. If I wanted to be more muscular, then I would more so do it like that. And then it connects to, this is behind the chest. So then this would come down like that. I know there's a spot here. That's the bottom of the pelvis. So I've got my rough map just from having these loose shapes.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also done a ton of anatomy and I'm not perfect at anatomy either. Like, there are plenty of things that I could do better in anatomy. I should practice more than I do, but I don't go to this extent because I know how these shapes roughly lie.
Yeah, and like I would argue that these like making these shapes is a lot harder and looks a lot worse than the final product that I had done.
Yeah, you did a good job, but what I was trying to show you with this is how these shapes interlock. So, like, this, you're trying to copy what I've done here, right? But if you know that it's a flat plane and you have your pieces coming up, then you could just simply start with this box. So then I can just kind of, I know that one finger is sticking out like this. So I can just kind of do that. And then because I know if I take the extra time to add those separations there, then I have those shapes, right? But if I know that that's what those shapes already are, then I can just make them without making the separations, and then I have a finger. So it's a matter of just finding those shapes, seeing them. This is just to make it obvious of what you're seeing, and then just drawing it.
I don't know, because one of my challenging things is like trying to actually like without a reference or something, imagining or picturing where those fingers start, where that stuff is, and that's all about anatomy,
right?
And stuff. Whereas wireframes give you that good jump off point, but
well, the thing about the wireframes, so what you're talking about is something called visual library. What your visual library is basically, you know, as you move through life, you collect things in your brain, kind of like a computer. The more that you observe, the more you can call from imagination. So if I didn't have any of this showing, and I wanted to just kind of draw a hand, right? I know from my visual library, I know from just doing it hundreds of times, that hand is a box with three cylinders coming off at each hand point. I could look at my hand as the reference as I'm drawing, or I can just say, I know what this looks like, so I'm going to draw a hand. Because I know just from observation that a hand has... Sorry, I can't draw and talk at the same time, clearly. A hand has 4 fingers, a hand has 1 thumb, and they have a certain amount of distance between. So, like, if I drew this from the front, I'm still starting with my box. I know that the thumb comes about halfway from the box and is a little bit of a separation out. I know that the knuckles start here at the top of the box. I know that the middle finger is the longest finger and usually touches the ring finger. It's too long. So this is just from observation, right? But you're not going to be able to do something like this. Those are tiny compared to this. But you're not going to be able to do something like that until you actually sit down and learn how to break down those shapes that you're already observing. So that's the point of the wireframes.
Sure.
you have any questions? Anything you want to try?
No, other than it's really hard to want to do that and not just be like, okay, but let me just skip that and just draw the shapes because it's sausages on the end of it.
So that's the thing, is you can go ahead, draw your shape. But if you notice that something's wrong, now you have a way to figure out how to fix it, right? Because it's like, okay, something's wrong with this. I don't know exactly what. Then I have that turned off. Then the thing that you can do is, okay, I'm not sure why this looks off. Let me draw my box. My box doesn't fit here. So that tells me that my palm is actually wrong. So, or my box does fit here, but my fingers look really big compared to that box. So it's probably my fingers being too long. So, like, go ahead, do your shapes. Try and trace your shapes. But, like, if you see something off, but you're not sure what it is, that gives you an option to fix it. And you might find that your simplified shapes look different than mine. These are what makes sense to my mind. Some people use different shapes. You know, some people use a little bit of a like rounded circle with a flat end for a hand. Some people will do like grid shapes. For feet, I've seen people do 2 squares instead of 2 triangle and a square. I've seen people do 2 triangles. It all comes down to what shape makes the most sense for you, but that shape is the best base.
Fat feet.
Those are pretty fat. And also, like I said, I was a little bit worried about showing you this first before showing you something like perspective, because these are things in perspective, right? They are in a space. So, like, you're trying to make the shapes, yeah, but it's going to change based on where something is sitting in a plane. And that gets pretty complex. Anatomy is complex because it takes a little bit of every other fundamental and smashes it together. See, that looks a lot better than the blob that you did.
Well, yeah, the blob I just did, and then I said, yep, I'm done because I don't want to do it anymore.
Right.
Ankles.
Those ankles are way low. Your ankle would actually, in this wireframe here, your ankles are at the top of your cheese wedge.
They're right there.
Your ankle is not right there.
That's where the ball is. That's where the ball that hangs out is.
So, first off, your ankle is at an angle like that. So, when you connect to a leg, it's something like that. But that has to do with symmetry in the body and stuff like that. You're not at that level yet. We're not going to talk about that because it will take all night, and I don't want to overwhelm you. This is pretty great. The thing is, this foot is at an angle, so you've got a perspective thing happening here where this is straight and flat to you, but this is at an angle, and that's why this looks a little bit off. Maybe next time we'll talk about perspective, because that will make stuff like this easier.
Maybe.
But if you wanted to break this down and just do the shapes, then your basic shape of this is going to break down to, there's your heel. There's your, so this is your square. This is your triangle from the side.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Okay.
How you feeling?
Feel like I have more examples and reasons for not drawing hands and feet.
That is every artist.
Mhm.
I promise you, every artist hates hands.
Just all of my characters are going to be bakers and wearing oven mitts.
You'll get the hang of it. Eventually, you'll see it as a challenge and not a threat.
I didn't see the hands as a threat last time. I did my hands. Yeah, the fingers were fat because I didn't want to take the time to go back and make them smaller.
I was particularly impressed with how you did this hand on your actual thing.
Mm-hmm.
You did a very good job with that, and that's because you do have a decent idea of what these look like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what they break down to. They break down to sausages, like you said. And all I did that was different than that is I segmented it into cylinders.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where your joints are.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know, keep thinking of things in that way, but that's how you break down a reference. If you're not sure how something is supposed to be sitting based on a reference, take it into the program and redline it. See if you can figure out what the base shapes are. And then, you know, don't trace that. Don't bring that into your actual drawing. But once you study it that way, you should have a better idea of how to draw it on your actual drawing.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now I get to try and put this into... I don't know the next time we're doing humans.
You
But-
technically have a bit of a human in your film study.
Yeah, a blurred bit.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and we could go over anatomy and stuff again before the next time we go over humans. I think honestly, the next time we do humans, genre swap maybe.
Oh, maybe.
If not, then it's the mermaid.
Yeah, that's true. Unless.
Undine.
Unless. But okay, this is interesting. This is stuff that I kind of knew about. Like you saw that I put a wireframe in for like the body
Yeah,
and stuff, and for like the arms and legs.
and I was super excited. Like you remember me freaking out.
Yeah.
So heckin' proud of you.
Oh my gosh.
Because like that's actually something that's fairly hard to grasp and fairly hard to like instinctually do right away. Because it is a lot easier to just kind of go, well, this is human shape, so let me just throw this here.
And that's what that original drawing of Cassandra was. It was very much this is this is human shape. There are arms and legs.
Yep.
What's a torso? What's a hips? Who knows?
These pool noodle tubes are great.
That's exactly what those limbs were.
But yeah, you did much better with your redraw. It was just like I could tell you were still trying to kind of trace based on what you thought the human shape was, even though you used the wireframe.
Mm-hmm.
So this is hopefully the nuance that helps.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Next time, it's going to be even worse. Be like, what are these shapes? I don't know. No.
You'll get better at it. It takes a lot of practice to do people. There's a reason why I still really dislike doing people.
Mhm.
So, you know, it is what it is. But
Indeed.
thank you, everybody, for sitting through this very rambly anatomy lesson. I hope that it was helpful for you. And as always, I hope that you are taking care of yourselves, drink your water, and do what you can. And we'll see you later. Bye, everybody.
Bye.